Quick geography quiz. Name every state that borders Nebraska to the north. If you said South Dakota and, I think one more? Don't worry, you're in good company. Most Americans can locate the Dakotas on a map only because they're two identical-looking rectangles sitting on top of each other in the middle of the country, which makes them hard to miss even if you've never once thought about them. And that, in a nutshell, is the Dakotas problem. North Dakota and South Dakota are consistently ranked among the least visited, least talked about, and least moved to states in America. North Dakota has a population of about 780,000 people, roughly the same as the city of Denver, spread across a state the size of Ohio, Indiana, and West Virginia combined. South Dakota has around 925,000. Together, the two states have fewer residents than the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. So why does essentially nobody move here? And here's the more interesting question. Should they? Because once you dig into the actual data, the cost of living, the job market, the taxes, the quality of life, you start to wonder whether the Dakotas might be the most underrated places to live in the entire United States, or whether there are very good reasons everyone avoids them. Probably both. Let's find out. The reputation problem. The Dakotas have a branding problem. And unlike Greenland, which at least has the northern lights and dramatic fjords to make up for its name being a lie, the Dakotas don't have an obvious selling point that cuts through in a conversation. Ask 10 Americans what they associate with North Dakota, and you'll get some variation of cold, flat, far away, and, if they've seen the Coen Brothers movie, bodies being disposed of in wood chippers. The movie is set in Minnesota, by the way, but it's called Fargo, which is North Dakota's largest city. This has done incalculable damage to North Dakota's reputation with people who don't read the opening credits. South Dakota does slightly better. People know about Mount Rushmore. About 2.5 million people visit it every year. Look at 4 presidents carved into a rock for about 45 minutes, wonder if the gift shop has anything worth buying, and then leave. Many of them don't venture much beyond the parking lot, which means South Dakota's most famous attraction is essentially a drive-through. But the deeper issue is this. In the American cultural imagination, there are states that feel like destinations. California, New York, Texas, Florida. And then there are states that feel like places you pass through on your way somewhere else. The Dakotas have, through no particular fault of their own, ended up firmly in the second category. The result is that most Americans know virtually nothing accurate about what it's actually like to live there, which, it turns out, is a problem worth examining. The legitimate complaints. Let's be honest first, because the Dakotas have real downsides, and pretending otherwise would be intellectually dishonest and also immediately detectable by anyone who has actually spent a January there. The weather in the Dakotas is genuinely extreme by any standard that doesn't involve Antarctica. In Bismarck, North Dakota, the state capital, the average January high is 21 degrees Fahrenheit. The average low is around 1 degree. These are the averages. It can, and does, get considerably worse. North Dakota regularly records the coldest temperatures in the contiguous United States. Not cold like Boston cold. Cold like your car doesn't start, your face hurts walking from the front door to the car, and the wind, because the Great Plains have essentially nothing to stop it, hits you at speeds that make the air feel another 15 degrees colder than it already is. South Dakota is not dramatically better. Rapid City, in the western part of the state, gets a bit more protection from the Black Hills, but the eastern half is similarly exposed to what locals call Alberta Clippers, fast-moving cold fronts that drop in from Canada and rearrange your week. The summer, to be fair, is genuinely beautiful. Warm, sunny, low humidity, long days. But the summer is approximately 4 months long. The rest of the year is a negotiation with the elements. The second legitimate complaint is the sheer scale of the emptiness. North Dakota has about 11 people per square mile. For comparison, New Jersey has 1,263. This means that outside of a handful of cities, you are dealing with long drives, limited services, and the kind of social infrastructure that relies on knowing everyone in a 30-mile radius. If you are accustomed to having 12 different grocery stores within a 10-minute drive, the option of 16 coffee shops by 8 a.m., and the social density of a major metro area, the Dakotas will require an adjustment that is not entirely unlike moving to a different country. There are no major professional sports teams in either Dakota. No NBA, no NFL, no MLB, no NHL. The closest thing to a major metropolitan cultural anchor is Fargo, with a population of about 130,000, which is a perfectly nice mid-sized city, but is not, in the conventional sense, a metropolis. These are real downsides. They're not invented, and anyone selling you on the Dakotas without acknowledging them is either from there and has developed selective memory, or is trying to sell you real estate. Now, here's the part nobody talks about: the money argument. And it's compelling. The single strongest argument for moving to the Dakotas is financial, and it's more significant than most people realize. South Dakota's tax situation. South Dakota has no state income tax. None. 0% on wages, salaries, capital gains, investment income, retirement distributions, Social Security, all of it untaxed at the state level. This puts South Dakota in a club with only 6 other states, and it's a genuinely meaningful financial benefit. If you earn $150,000 a year and move from California, which taxes that income at around 9.3%, to South Dakota, you keep roughly $14,000 more per year, without changing anything else about your life except your zip code. South Dakota also has no estate tax, no inheritance tax, and no corporate income tax. This is not an accident or an oversight. It's a deliberate policy designed to attract wealth, businesses, and residents. The Tax Foundation's State Tax Competitiveness Index ranked South Dakota second in the entire country in 2026. The state generates its revenue primarily through sales tax, which is among the lowest in the region at 4.2%. This is why South Dakota quietly hosts a disproportionate amount of American private wealth. Major banks and trust companies are headquartered in Sioux Falls specifically because of the favorable legal and tax environment. Some of the largest credit card companies in America are legally domiciled in South Dakota because the state eliminated interest rate caps in 1980 and attracted the industry in a single legislative session. That's a story for another video, but the point is, South Dakota takes its financial environment very seriously. North Dakota also has no sales tax on groceries, low overall tax burden, and a cost of living that consistently ranks among the most affordable in the country. Housing. The median home price in South Dakota is around $290,000. In North Dakota, it's approximately $265,000. Compare that to the national median of about $420,000, or California's median of roughly $800,000, and you begin to understand why people from high-cost states who can work remotely are doing the math on whether the Dakotas make financial sense. A $500,000 house in San Francisco gets you something that requires a very creative realtor description. In Sioux Falls, $500,000 gets you something that your real estate agent will describe using words like estate. The job market. North Dakota's unemployment rate sits around 2.3%, one of the lowest in the country. This is not a coincidence. The state has a diversified economy built on agriculture, energy, manufacturing, and increasingly, technology. Fargo in particular has attracted a surprising cluster of tech and professional services companies. Microsoft has its second largest campus outside of Washington State in Fargo. Caterpillar chose Fargo over South Korea for a manufacturing facility. Northrop Grumman has a presence in Grand Forks. South Dakota's unemployment rate is similarly low, and Sioux Falls, the state's largest city at around 220,000 people, regularly appears on lists of the best cities for young professionals, small business owners, and retirees. These are not the economic landscapes that the word Dakota conjures in most people's minds, but they're real. The oil story. When North Dakota briefly lost its mind. No discussion of North Dakota's economy is complete without talking about what happened between roughly 2008 and 2015, when the state accidentally became one of the most economically chaotic places in America. Beneath western North Dakota lies the Bakken Formation, a massive deposit of shale oil that was, for most of history, considered impossible to extract economically. Then hydraulic fracturing, fracking, made it accessible, and North Dakota went from a quiet agricultural state to, briefly, the second largest oil-producing state in America, behind only Texas. The numbers are staggering. Before the oil boom, oil and gas represented about 2% of North Dakota's economy. By 2014, it was nearly 16%. The state went from a modest budget to a billion-dollar surplus. Unemployment dropped to the lowest in the nation, around 2%, in the middle of the worst recession since the Great Depression. Workers were flooding in from across the country, attracted by wages that could hit $100,000 a year for jobs that didn't require a college degree. And then things got weird. The small city of Williston, North Dakota, population around 15,000 before the boom, saw its population double almost overnight. The demand for housing vastly outstripped supply because you can't build enough apartments in 3 years to house 15,000 new workers in a town that previously had no reason to build them. At the peak of the boom, a 700-square-foot one-bedroom apartment in Williston cost $2,394 a month. That was more expensive than comparable apartments in San Francisco and New York at the time. Workers who couldn't find apartments lived in man camps, sprawling temporary housing complexes outside of town, ranging from reasonably organized prefab barracks to, in some documented cases, mattresses on floors shared by a dozen people. The state that had just printed $1 billion surplus couldn't build infrastructure fast enough to keep up with the people arriving to generate it. The boom peaked around 2014. Oil prices collapsed. The rig count dropped from 58 to 11 in a single year. Some of those boom towns deflated nearly as fast as they'd inflated. The lesson, if there is one, is that resource booms are genuinely good for state finances and genuinely difficult for communities, and that the pace of change matters as much as the direction of change. North Dakota's oil industry has stabilized since then, producing around 1.1 to 1.2 million barrels per day and remaining an important part of the state's economic base without the chaotic social dynamics of the boom years. The cities nobody knows about. One of the most persistent misconceptions about the Dakotas is that they consist entirely of farms, small towns, and prairie, which is mostly true by land area, but significantly less true by where the actual people live. Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Sioux Falls is a genuinely surprising city. It's the 73rd largest city in America, with around 220,000 residents and a metro area approaching 300,000. It has a low crime rate, a growing restaurant and arts scene, a beautiful downtown centered on the actual falls of the Big Sioux River, and a cost of living that makes residents of comparable cities in other states deeply envious. The median household income in Sioux Falls is above the national average. The unemployment rate is low. The housing is affordable. And because the state's financial industry is concentrated here, there are well-paying professional jobs in banking, insurance, and legal services that don't require you to work outdoors in January. South Dakota has been consistently voted one of the best states to raise a family and one of the most business-friendly in the country. Sioux Falls gets a disproportionate share of credit for both. Fargo, North Dakota. Fargo has the additional challenge of sharing a name with a movie and TV show that depicted it as a bleak, violent, morally compromised place, which is, to be clear, not an accurate description of the real city. The real Fargo is a mid-sized college town that has quietly grown into a regional economic hub. It has 2 major universities, a tech sector that punches above its weight, a surprisingly vibrant art scene, and a downtown that has undergone genuine revitalization over the past decade. Fargo also benefits from its proximity to Moorhead, Minnesota, just across the Red River, creating a combined metro area of about 250,000 people and 2 states' worth of economic activity. Fargo has added nearly 10,300 residents since 2020, making it one of the faster-growing mid-sized cities in the Midwest. Rapid City and the Black Hills. Rapid City is the gateway to the Black Hills, and the Black Hills deserve more attention than they get. This is the region that contains Mount Rushmore, yes, but also Custer State Park, Wind Cave National Park, and Jewel Cave National Monument. The landscape is dramatic, forested mountains rising sharply out of the Great Plains, and the outdoor recreation options are genuinely excellent. Hiking, rock climbing, mountain biking, and in winter, skiing at Deer Mountain. Rapid City itself is a city of about 80,000 with a growing economy, low cost of living, and the kind of proximity to spectacular natural scenery that people in Colorado pay a very high premium to access. The case for moving there, and who actually does. So, who is actually choosing to move to the Dakotas and why? The answer is 3 categories of people. 1. Remote workers. 2. Retirees. And 3. People who grew up there and came back. Remote workers have discovered what the tax math looks like when you're earning a coastal salary and can choose your state of residence. If you're making $200,000 a year working remotely and you move from California to South Dakota, you keep roughly $20,000 more per year in state income taxes alone. Over 10 years, that's $200,000. You can buy a lot of house in Sioux Falls for $200,000. Retirees have figured out the same math from a different angle. There is no state income tax in South Dakota, which means Social Security, pensions, and retirement accounts are all entirely tax-free at the state level. For someone drawing down a retirement portfolio, the difference between living in South Dakota versus, say, Minnesota or Iowa is meaningful every single year. Return migrants are a phenomenon that demographic researchers have increasingly documented. Rural sociologist Ben Winchester has found that the main reason people move back to rural communities is quality of life, not because a specific job is available there. People leave the Dakotas for education and early careers, live in bigger cities for a decade, and then return when they want space, safety, low costs, and a community where they actually know their neighbors. This cycle is real and ongoing. What the Dakotas are not attracting in large numbers, yet, is the young, mobile, urban professional who has no prior connection to the region. That's the marketing challenge. The product is better than the reputation. The gap between the two is the opportunity. So, should you move to the Dakotas? Here's an honest answer. If you don't like cold weather, need a major city with millions of people, work in an industry clustered in a coastal metro, or simply can't imagine a life where the nearest Trader Joe's is 45 minutes away, probably not. The Dakotas would make you miserable, and misery doesn't improve with tax savings. But if you can tolerate winter, work remotely or in a field with opportunities in mid-sized cities, are buying a house and want to actually be able to afford it, or are building wealth and would like to keep more of it, the Dakotas are worth a serious look that most people never give them. The states that attract the most people are often the states with the best marketing, not necessarily the best conditions. The Dakotas have had famously bad marketing for approximately their entire existence as states. 2 rectangles in the middle of the country, associated with cold weather, wood chippers, and a president carved into a rock. The actual experience of living there, affordable, safe, quiet, financially advantageous, with surprising pockets of genuine quality, is a different story. One that most Americans will never hear, because the Dakotas are too boring to trend on social media, and too cold to attract the kind of lifestyle influencers who shape where people think about moving, which, depending on your perspective, is either the Dakotas' greatest problem or their greatest feature.